Hi folks, thanks for stopping by. Today we're going to be taking a look in detail at this 1945 made Walther K43. It's a very late production rifle, and that is interesting because of the way it disassembles and some of the features that it has related to that. This video kind of stems from a discussion I was having on a Facebook group when I posted the video related to the M1 rifle, SVT-40 and K43, where I said that I thought this one was the easiest to take apart. And there was some discussion regarding that. And some folks disagreed, some folks agreed, but I want to talk about the way the late production K43 is different from the earlier production. Most of the videos you're going to see, they have a latch here on the bolt carrier, and on the late production rifles, that is removed. What that latch would do is when you would lock the bolt basically to the rear, that latch would hold all of this together, and then you could remove it from the rifle by pushing in on a little disassembly button there. These later rifles are not that way. First though, let's go ahead and let's turn the rifle up on end. Go ahead and throw it over onto safe, which is going to be necessary later on. Actually, I'm going to leave the magazine in for right now. We're going to see that we have this thing unloaded, nothing in the magazine, nothing in the chamber. And you can see that K43 action is kind of a rough one. That's more or less just how they are. So, gas system first, just to get that out of the way. For full disclosure, I have actually pushed this button in for disassembly a little bit because it's easier for me to do that when the rifle is vertical. And so I've just moved it forward, probably like 0.010 of an inch or so, just so it's not latched anymore. Just so I'm not trying to do that vertically on camera where you can't see it. So we'll take out the cleaning rod here. Just unscrews. It's a right hand thread, so very normal. If I keep it from rolling away. And then what I find is easiest is you would push in on this little retainer here with a bullet or something. And what I think is easiest to do is actually, instead of trying to pull forward on this nose cap, is to just push forward on the upper handguard section, and it will push that nose cap off. I'm just going to do it kind of gently so I don't send it flinging off down the barrel too hard. There it is. So, and then the handguard here separates from the nose cap. This stays on the barrel. It doesn't really come off unless you have like the sight hood and the sight out. So there's no real way to remove this in the field. It just stays on. So I'm going to put the rifle sitting back up on its magazine here. So this is Rob Applegate's gas system. It's a reduced power one so that the action isn't damaged, since these tended to be so overgassed. Make this a little easier on me. I'm going to pull the carrier back and lock it back. Then just pull back on here. A little connecting link comes out. This washer is a shim to try to take some of the slop out of the gas system. Everything's gonna roll. The piston comes back, or the cylinder, I guess. The piston's here. A little bit of discoloration there. And then your operating rod comes out there with a spring. And so that's the gas system. You've got a gas port back here in the piston. The cylinder slips over, and that's how that works. Pretty straightforward. Now let's get on to the way the bolt works, because that's the interesting thing. So this gas system more or less stays the same throughout production. The later ones, like this one's original, actually would have had, I've got it over there somewhere, but the original one actually would have had some holes drilled in it. That was done later on, trying to solve the overgassing issue. It probably helped some, but not enough. These still tend to be somewhat fragile if they're used with the original gas system, whether it has the holes drilled or not. So if we had the earlier style, what we would be doing now is pulling this back, engaging the latch, then pushing the button, and this whole assembly would come off spring-loaded, which is not ideal, if you ask me. I think this system is a lot better. I think a big misconception you get is that the Germans were just trying to simplify all the way up to the end, and that isn't the case. They were certainly trying to simplify certain things, but what you also have is that they were in efforts to continuously improve the product. These modifications are fairly late on introduction. So let's go ahead and I'm going to keep the magazine in just to keep the rifle sitting up on it. Makes it a little easier for you guys to see what's going on here. Send the bolt forward. Safety is on. And I'm going to push in on the little disassembly button, and the whole action cover piece back here just lifts up, just tilts up out of the way. That does not happen, shouldn't be done on one of the earlier rifles. So we'll bring this out. You've got one of your recoil springs there, then this sort of guide rod thing here, and you have this spring that works with the little telescoping button rod deal. This can be taken apart. It's not really all that difficult to do, but probably not something you would need to do all the time. But this just slides off like so. Just pull down the spring, it comes off. And then there's this. It does not come apart further. This is crimped on, so they're a permanent assembly. At least you hope they stay a permanent assembly. The dust cover here does not come off. That is also a permanent assembly. That's put on, I would assume, before they do the operation here for the charger guide. Not sure, but that's what I would assume. You'd probably break that if you try to remove it. So now we come here to the bolt carrier, grab the charging handle here, and this all pulls out the back. You can either take these off together, or the carrier can just lift off on its own. You see the little foot here, that goes down through the bolt into the locking wedge. So that's what moves all this back and forth. We can take this out of the rifle, the whole bolt assembly there. So now this is another example of Walther continuously improving the K43 as long as they had the opportunity to. Of course, in April, May 1945, development of the K43 more or less ended entirely. You kind of see influence of it in other things later on, but it as its own rifle ceased to be a thing that existed really. They never made any more. But this feature here, I believe, is only implemented by Walther, and it's a retainer for your locking wedge and firing pin assembly. They're together. And what this does is that if you have the earlier style, this just falls out the back. I believe only Walther ever actually implemented this. I guess while we're looking at the back of the bolt here, it's important to note that these little crescent cutouts, these little half circle sort of cutouts, They are here only for the purpose of your action cover being able to tilt up. They are not present on the earlier style, and that's one of the reasons why your action cover can't come off like this. You really run pretty severe risk of damage trying to do that with the earlier style rifle. I would assume that it would damage it because you need that relief there. But what I can do here is just push on this little retainer with some implement, just using this chamber flag. It's not a lot of pressure necessary. So then, and then the flappers pretty much just fall out for you. That can be pulled to the side. That allows a little firing pin extension to come out, and the firing pin comes out. So kind of a twofold thing. It keeps your firing pin extension, your firing pin inside of the locking wedge, and also keeps the locking wedge and all the associated firing pin parts from falling out of the bolt if you don't intend it to come out, which also keeps the flappers from falling out. So kind of nice that it is done that way. Like I said, I only believe that Walther implemented that. None of the other manufacturers ever adopted that change. So that's just a Walther thing, where they were trying to improve the Walther K43. They want it to be a good rifle. And that really completes your disassembly. The magazine, if you wanted to take it out, of course, it just has this little latch there. I think what you might realize here is that I'm struggling with getting this magazine back in. There we go. This really reminds me of a Kalashnikov. Not so much the gas system, obviously, that's an SVT-40 gas system. But I really think that if you look at the SVT-40, you look at what was going on with that kind of action, I think the K43 of the early type was intended to be an improvement on what they were seeing wrong with the SVT-40. When they were making the G41, which is essentially the same action as the K43 or the G43, it seems to me like they saw how on the SVT-40 you have to get this action cover forward and off, and then you have to get the bolt back and out. And they saw the latch as a way to compress those things and be able to get them out in one go. I don't know that for sure, but that's what it seems like looking at them. And of course, the G41 came after the SVT-40, and they had seen them and had experience with that. Then it looks like this is a further development where they said, what can we do to where we can just get this action cover off the back instead of having to compress them together? Why can't we just take them apart while the springs are in a relaxed state? That's what it seems like they did here. And if you have any experience with an AK, you know, you just have that button there, you push it in, the action cover comes off, and everything comes out the back. Gas system's different, obviously. The AK is long stroke, this is short stroke. But I think I see influence here as far as what Kalashnikov eventually did for his rifle design. So let's move this back out of the way. And a lot of folks really act like these bolts are difficult to reassemble. I don't find that to be particularly true. I say that as I then now come over here and can't get this thing to start. I jinxed it. I shouldn't have said anything, huh? There it is. Just had to get that lined up right, which you wouldn't have to do that on the earlier style, but on this one you do have to get that lined up for the retainer. But that keeps it from falling out. So So then the flappers here, they are directional, but fortunately they have kind of staked the side of one of them, and there is a recess cut out. And I just stick it there. One of them, two of them, and then that just goes in, push in on the retainer, and it all goes back together like that. So a few things to kind of hold together and do right, but not all that difficult, and this doesn't have a tendency to fall apart on its own. It stays together, so you're not going to just, like on the earlier style K43, once you take it out, it just all falls apart on you. Then, simple enough to just go ahead, put the carrier back down into it. Just has that little hole in there. Carrier goes in. Kind of drop this just into the back of the action here. Pull back to make sure the locking lugs are disengaged. We'll push down on the magazine since I have that in still. You get a little bit of resistance from the spring-loaded ejector. Just push it down, and it all goes in. We'll go ahead and put your recoil spring parts back together. This is something that you could potentially get reversed. But you just compress the spring like so, pulling it back, and then it just sits on there that way. Pretty straightforward. This will end up going back in to the action cover, like so. Spring, the long one that goes on the front, goes back in. Stick it into the back of the bolt. Our safety is still in the on position. Push forward on the action cover, push in on the button, and it just pops right back into place, just like so. Gas system reassembles really easily. Go ahead, put the spring back on the little operating rod. There may be other terms for this stuff, but I'm going to call it that because that's what I can kind of relate it to. I should have left the action lock back. Push that back. Piston goes on. Little connecting link goes on. And there we are. And that washer, just to explain the purpose of that, it takes the slop out so that when I pull back on this, it barely moves before it contacts the carrier back here, the whole assembly. And that's just so you don't get a whole lot of velocity going and it strikes the carrier hard. Apparently the carriers can crack on these. Obviously this one hasn't. This is all matching rifle, but some of them do. So I'm trying to prevent that. I don't shoot this a lot. I've only actually fired, I think, 7 rounds out of it total. It is more or less a museum piece because these are quite scarce. And I would rather not break a nice one like this. So then, putting it back together, nose cap, you just have to compress the little retainer there. Line it up, little snug, but just push it back, there it is, and we'll screw back in cleaning rod. Only takes a few turns. And there you have it. You've got a reassembled K43. Go ahead and close the action back up. Back to fire. So I hope you enjoyed it, folks. If this is the kind of stuff that interests you, go ahead and like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you learned something from this especially. I wish I had a earlier war K43 to compare this to. I only have this one, but there are plenty of videos to where if you want to see how the latch type works, go take a look at that. I'll leave the video link in the description for the prior video on the M1 SVT40 and the K43, where I didn't take apart the gas system and all. But so check that out and let me know what you think, because I think this is pretty easy. I think this is good. This is modern. It is kind of AK-like. This is what you're used to seeing probably more often now, where things disassemble from the back end rather than like the M1 where it comes out more or less to the bottom of the gun, or the SVT40 where it does this weird switching back and forth. This is like you see on AKs. This is really kind of like the SKS, not exactly the same, but similar concept. And so this lived on. The M1 type of disassembly, I mean, I guess it kind of did, but not really anything outside of its family. No one's really copied that on other, different designs. But thanks for watching, and catch you next time.